We've talked about components and how we can change states by changing their appearance from one variant to the next. Let's take a look at a few other things that components can do between variants by looking at something like a toggle switch. So let's say we want to create a toggle switch for keeping the screen awake, and the user taps on this toggle, the dot moves from the left to the right, and then it indicates that, hey, the setting is on. So I just have a circle here. I have a rounded rectangle to depict the area where the toggle switch moves within. And the first thing we need to do is to make this a component. I'm actually not going to leave the label part of that, even though I know I want to add that. I'm just going to make it just the toggle switch. So the first thing we do is make this a component. I'm going to remember to name my properties. I'm going to add a property here for state of the variant. So we'll call this state value is off. Okay, let's add another variant of this. This state will be on with one N. And we can actually change the appearance in more terms than just the color or size or weight of things, but this also works for position. So in this case, when we tap on our toggle switch, we want the dot to move from the left to the right. So I can actually, let me switch over to my layers panel so you can see what these things are. I'm going to move this ellipse from the left to the right. And then you'll see when I preview this, let me first make a quick frame. We'll add an instance of this in that, and then preview it. Once I prototype this and make a link between when the user taps on this, it's going to change states to the next one. And when they tap on this one, I'll link it back to the off state. So now when I tap on this, you'll see that the dot moves from the left to the right. There's a few other cool things we can do here. So far we've used this instant animation. As long as our layer names remain the same, we can use this Smart Animate feature. And what this does is Figma will look at our layers and it'll say, okay, ellipse 1 is here in the off state. Where is that ellipse 1 layer in the on state? And then it will interpolate the positioning of that through our animation settings here. So if I turn that auto animate, or smart animate, I'm sorry, on for both of these, you'll see that I get some motion between the two, which is helpful. We can get even a little more complex with this if we wanted to add a visual indicator to the bar when this slides from left to right. So let's say that we want this to turn purple, a light purple when this is in the on state. Let me just close this so it's easier to see. I could just change the color of our rectangle here, but it doesn't really look realistic because it changes from the gray to the purple, but really it should kind of slide in behind our dot here. So what we can do, instead of just changing the color of this, I'm going to go ahead and undo all of that, turn this back to gray. We could add an element that is clipped from the edges of this frame that moves in along with the dot behind it. So I'm just going to do this from scratch to keep it clean. I'm going to say clip content on the edge of this frame, and I'm just going to duplicate this rounded rectangle. So you'll see this is rectangle 2. I'm going to name this fill. And then I'm going to slide this over so now it's behind my dot here. we could animate this in along with the movement of our ellipse. So let's add a new variant here. And then actually what I'm going to do is group these two things together. And we'll do the same here. We want to keep these clean, our layers looking the same structurally. And then when this is on, we'll slide the whole thing over to the right. So one other thing that's happening here is you'll see that changes from squared off on the left to rounded when it slides over because of the shape of our fill here. So what we could do is we could, instead of rounding our ellipse, we could round the corners of our entire component frame. And I'm just doing that to match what I know my rounded rectangle is. So that when this slides, it appears a little more natural. So now if we link those up with our prototyping, when this is tapped, change to this. Smart animate it, yep. I need to name my states. This will be state on. So on tap, change to my on state, and on tap, change to my off state. So let's preview this again. Okay, you'll see this is acting a little weird. So what's happening here is it sees this as called group 1 here, and it sees this as called group 2 here. So for this to work, Figma has to see these as the same named layers. So now when it sees that the structure of these are exactly the same, it's able to use that animation feature.